Hey guys, welcome back. This is Brown Chubby Bear for Political Bear Nation. This week's video is going to show how the NYPD, federal law enforcement, including the FBI, Congress, and even multiple presidents of the United States of America, failed to protect the 200 victims that Jeffrey Epstein abused and trafficked.
Political Bear Nation, ready to dive, where opinions spark and the debates thrive. Hold on tight.
We're going to start with how Epstein made his money before we even talk about how Trump is attempting to keep all his activities with Epstein a secret. It all started with a Ponzi scheme led by Stephen J. Hoffenberg, a scheme that led to an 18-year prison sentence for Hoffenberg, but Epstein was able to escape criminal prosecution. Hoffenberg first met Epstein in 1987 when Jeffrey was still just a college dropout who had a teaching job at a Manhattan prep school. Stephen paid Epstein $25,000 a month as a consultant, which is about $70,000 in today's money. Between 1998 and 1993, Towers Financial raised over $450 million from investors who thought their money was being invested properly. Instead, Towers Financial used the money to cover operating costs, repay earlier investors, and spend the money on themselves, the basis for any good Ponzi scheme. And it was one of the largest Ponzi schemes in the history of the United States before the Bernie Madoff one. Hoffenberg pled guilty without discovery, meaning Epstein's role was never fully investigated. But Epstein's ill-gotten gains from this scheme was a seed capital that he used for his own financial operations. In 2019, Hoffenberg told CBS that Epstein was his best friend and his closest friend for years. He said, "We ran a team of people on Wall Street, investment people, that raised these $1 billion illegally. He was my guy, my wingman." Epstein was never charged by the SEC, and this is the first failure we see by an American agency. In a 2018 civil lawsuit by investors, the lawsuit described Epstein as an uncharged co-conspirator. Stephen J. Hoffenberg died in 2022 in Derby, Connecticut, in an apartment, alone. But before he died, he converted to Christianity while he was in prison. He claimed he wanted to make amends with everyone he hurt, and he also reached out to the women who made assault allegations against Jeffrey Epstein. He even became friends with one of the very first victims to report Epstein's abuses, Maria Farmer. When they found Stephen's body, they determined Hoffenberg was dead for about a week. It was Maria Farmer that had called the police to go to his apartment for a wellness check because he failed to return her phone calls. Remember that name, Maria Farmer, because we're going to come back to it later and detail how multiple government agencies and the press failed to protect her and her younger sister. But right now, I wanted to talk to you about why Jeffrey Epstein attracted the wealthy in the first place. What did he do that made working with him so compelling to millionaires and billionaires? Well, Epstein became a financial wealth manager. Now, when most people think of wealth managers, they mostly think of stocks, funds, real estate, or other investment strategies that can grow their existing wealth. But Jeffrey Epstein wasn't just a money manager, he was essentially a one-man tax avoidance factory for billionaires. Despite having no college degree, no accounting license, or formal financial training, he mastered the most sophisticated wealth preservation techniques available and charged astronomical fees to help the ultra-wealthy save billions and billions of dollars. One client, Leon Black, had a complex tax problem involving a GRAT, or Grantor Retained Annuity Trust. If he died without fixing it, his children would have faced a potential billion-dollar tax bill. Epstein created a legal maneuver that kept the assets out of his taxable estate. Regular attorneys hadn't thought about it, but Epstein did, and he charged Leon $23.5 million just for this one fix. Leon Black happened to be the co-founder and former CEO of Apollo Global Management. He paid Jeffrey Epstein at least $170 million between 2012 and 2017 to help him save billions of dollars. This was a relationship that was developed after Epstein was convicted of soliciting a minor. That's how much people respected his abilities. But this is what Epstein did for his clients. He used complicated tax structures to save them billions of dollars. Epstein found a way to use real estate tax laws meant for property developers for expensive art. Many of the structures Epstein would design were complicated and required millions and millions of dollars just to set up. So he wasn't just a wealth manager for the wealthy, he was a wealth manager for the ultra-wealthy. Leon Black has been accused of rape in 3 separate lawsuits. One of the victims claims she was just 16 and the rape happened in Epstein's Manhattan townhouse. Leon Black has never been held accountable for his actions. Instead, he agreed to pay $62.5 million to avoid any lawsuits or prosecution in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Another large client, potentially his largest, was Leslie Wexner. Lex is a billionaire who acquired Victoria's Secret in 1982 for just $1 million and turned it into a billion-dollar company by 1992. Victoria's Secret is under L Brands, which also owns Bath & Body Works, Pink, The Limited, Express, Abercrombie & Fitch, among other brands. In 1991, Wexner gave Epstein complete power of attorney, allowing him to sign checks, buy properties, hire staff, and even make investments on Wexner's behalf. Friends and colleagues were mystified that Wexner would give Jeffrey Epstein so much power. Epstein was able to transfer some of Wexner's assets into his name, including that Manhattan townhouse I just talked about a few minutes ago. He also was able to transfer a luxury Ohio property and a private jet. Yes, that private jet. Now that we know what Epstein was doing with young girls, many people started to wonder if Epstein had blackmailed Wexner. Was that how Epstein was able to acquire so much of Wexner's wealth and property? Wexner has always denied that he knew about Epstein's sex trafficking activities. However, he knew something was up in 1997. Alicia Arden was 27 at the time, so she was not a teenager, but she did accuse Jeffrey Epstein of luring her to his Santa Monica hotel where he attempted to assault her. She claimed that Epstein posed as a Victoria's Secret model scout and he wanted an audition. She fled his hotel room in tears after he said he wanted to manhandle her. Wexner, as well as 2 other executives at L Brands, found out about this and apparently did absolutely nothing. They knew Epstein was falsely presenting himself as a representative of Victoria's Secret to lure women and literally did nothing about it. This is a good time to make sure you guys understand 2 things. Number 1, even though most people talk about Epstein's crimes in terms of his abuse of underage girls, there are lots of documented abuse cases with women that are a little older as well. He didn't just prey on girls, he preyed on all types of women from ages 13 to 30. The second thing I want you guys to understand is that this is just the first video I'm doing about Trump and Epstein. And as more information is revealed, I will make more videos, so please subscribe. Back to Lex Wexner. Now, L Brands, the parent company of Victoria's Secret, did launch an internal investigation, but the findings were never released to the public. Instead, they committed $90 million to revamp the company's internal sexual harassment, discrimination, and retaliation policies. But think of how many women and young girls could have been protected if Wexner or anyone at L Brands would have come forward and reported the abuse to authorities. Nothing exposes how much we as a country have failed the victims than the story of Maria Farmer. But it's important that we all understand that Maria Farmer was the first victim to ever report Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell to law enforcement. She did this all the way back in 1996. Epstein's reign of terror could have ended 20 years earlier than it did if only law enforcement took her seriously. Believe women. In 1995, Maria Farmer, who was an artist who specialized in figurative works often depicting nude women, met Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell at her graduation exhibit at the New York Academy of Art. She sold one of her paintings to Epstein for $6,000, and Epstein quickly hired Maria to work as his personal art buyer and to manage the front desk of his Manhattan townhouse. During this time, she witnessed many young women coming and going into the house. She even observed Ghislaine Maxwell going to get girls by driving through Central Park and literally stopping the car to run out and convince a young girl she should be a model. That was their cover. Epstein and Maxwell said they needed these young women to be models for Victoria's Secret. Besides the money and property that Epstein was able to get from Wexner, Epstein was able to use the relationship with Wexner and therefore Victoria's Secret to lure young women into his presence. In 1996, Epstein invited Maria to become a summer artist in residence at his property in New Albany, Ohio, which is part of Les Wexner's estate that Epstein was able to control. After she arrived at the Ohio property, she learned that the home was guarded by Wexner's armed security personnel, and she was required to phone Wexner's wife, Abigail Wexner, anytime she wanted to just leave the property. Maria claimed one day both Epstein and Maxwell began groping her over her clothes, rubbing her body, commenting on her features, and twisting her nipples to the point of bruising. She said they did it in unison, mirroring each other's movements. She thought she was going to be raped, so she ran out of the room and barricaded herself in another part of the house with furniture. Security guards on the property told her she could not leave. She was eventually able to get away when her father arrived after driving all the way from Kentucky to Ohio to pick her up and save her. Now, Wexner claims he was never aware of Epstein's illegal activities, and I find that very hard to believe. The security guards didn't tell him anything? Wexner has never been accused, either civilly or criminally, of abusing anyone. But how can anyone deny that he enabled Jeffrey Epstein? Maria was able to stop the abuse from escalating by escaping from Epstein and Maxwell. However, later that summer, she learned that her 15-year-old sister, Annie, had been sexually assaulted a few months ago by Epstein and Maxwell at a Zorro ranch in New Mexico. Epstein told Annie's mother that she was being invited to the New Mexico ranch for a weekend retreat to help support gifted students. Ghislaine Maxwell was presented as a chaperone, which helped convince Annie's mother that everything would be okay, and she allowed the trip to happen, because who would think that an older woman like Ghislaine Maxwell would actively assist Epstein to abuse an underage girl? The abuse actually started with Maxwell. She took off Annie's top and gave her an incredibly inappropriate massage. Then, Epstein climbed into bed with Annie and said he wanted to cuddle with her. He then coerced her into giving him foot massages while he made adult groaning noises. On August 26, 1996, Maria Farmer contacted the New York City Police Department about the abuse by Epstein and Maxwell. This date makes her the earliest known victim to report Jeffrey Epstein's crime to law enforcement. When Maria first went to the NYPD to report on the abuse, the police referred her to the FBI because Ohio was outside their jurisdiction, but the FBI did nothing to help her. In fact, Maria Farmer claims that after spending 30 minutes talking to an FBI agent on the phone, the agent simply hung up on her, and no one from the FBI ever followed up. So far, we have failures by the SEC, the NYPD, the FBI, Lex Wexner, L Brands, and Wexner's security guards, and probably more. But let's fast forward to 2002, when Maria and Ann Farmer, along with their mother, shared their stories with Vicky Ward at Vanity Fair, who was writing a profile on Jeffrey Epstein. Both sisters and their mother described the abuse in great detail, but their story was excluded from the final article by then-editor Graydon Carter. Carter later claimed that he received multiple threats from Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein began showing up to his office, but he also, allegedly, left a severed cat's head in front of his yard and placed a bullet right outside his front door. Epstein successfully intimidated the editor-in-chief of Vanity Fair, so in addition to the NYPD and the FBI that failed these women, so did the press. By the time Epstein's crimes were uncovered in 2006, it was 10 years too late. By then, hundreds of victims had been abused. You have to understand how strong Maria Farmer was as a person. According to court documents, Maxwell first started calling her and threatened to burn any art she made if she told her story to the public, and then it escalated to death threats. Maxwell allegedly said, "I know you go to the West Side Highway all the time. While you're out there, just be really careful, because there are a lot of ways to die there." Maria was forced to relocate multiple times and change her name. Epstein and Maxwell called her clients in the art world and destroyed her credibility. Maria had to finally abandon her dream of being an artist and essentially had to disappear. Now, there are other victims like Virginia Giuffre, who was recruited at Mar-a-Lago by Maxwell, but I believe most people know a decent amount of her story, including her allegations against Prince Andrew and ultimately her unfortunate suicide, which happened back in April. So I won't be getting too much into her story. But Senator Ron Wyden believes there are more stories just like hers, and to uncover them, he wants to review all of the financial records. Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon, the top Democrat on the powerful Senate Finance Committee, has been digging into Epstein's financial network for the past 3 years. The Biden administration gave him access to some records, but he wants full access, and I think he should get it. There are 4,725 wire transfers totaling $1.1 billion through just one bank account. And there are hundreds of millions of dollars that flow through other accounts. There are at least 4 major banks with suspicious activity, including thousands of wire transfers for the purchase and sale of artwork for rich friends, fees paid to Epstein by wealthy individuals, and payments to numerous women all over the world, many in Russia, Belarus, Turkey, and Turkmenistan. JP Morgan Chase paid nearly $300 million to Epstein's victims, and Deutsche Bank paid $75 million for providing banking services to Jeffrey Epstein without flagging these transfers. Even after Epstein's 2008 conviction, Chase had internal emails and had called Epstein high risk back in 2006, and yet they did nothing. Deutsche Bank had over 100 of his transactions flagged, and yet they worked with him all the way up until 2018. Bank of America waited 7 years to report that Leon Black paid Epstein $170 million. Law enforcement did nothing in 1996. The SEC, the FBI, the NYPD all failed to protect these victims, including all the banks. Alex Acosta's deal in 2008 got Epstein to plea to just one count of soliciting a minor for prostitution, and all Jeffrey had to do was serve 13 months in county jail while he was able to get out of jail for up to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week on a work release program. And he had the audacity to be chauffeured around by a driver like a pop star. It was reported that Acosta told Trump that he was commanded to back off because Epstein was, quote, intelligence. But I don't buy that at all. I've read countless court documents, congressional investigations, and official DOJ reports, and the evidence overwhelmingly suggests that the claim that Jeffrey Epstein belonged to intelligence was most likely a fabricated excuse designed to deflect responsibility for one of the most egregious prosecutorial failures in modern American history. So let's end that conspiracy theory once and for all. By believing that Epstein was involved with some intelligence agency, it shifts focus away from the banks that failed to report suspicious activity, the failure of the FBI, the SEC, the NYPD, the press, and everyone else from doing their jobs to protect these victims. And it even shields his wealthy clients from being investigated further. And now we sit here in 2025 under the Trump administration, who seems to be doing everything they can do to hide the truth about Jeffrey Epstein. This is despite the fact that many of Trump's surrogates like Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino, or however you pronounce his stupid name, and Kash Patel, who promised that Trump would be the one to release all of these files.
Release the list.
Seriously, we need to release the Epstein list. That is an important thing.
Who's on the Epstein tapes, folks? Who's on those tapes? Who's in those black books?
So will you work with me on this issue so we know who worked with Jeffrey Epstein in building these sex trafficking rings?
Absolutely, Senator. Child sex trafficking has no place in the United States of America, and I will do everything, if confirmed as FBI director, to make sure the American public knows the full weight of what happened in the past and how we are going to countermand missing children and exploited children going forward.
Please do not let that story go.
Who has Jeffrey Epstein's
Black Book?
black book?
FBI.
But who?
Everything's going to come out to the public. The public has a right to know. Americans have a right to know.
But that's changed. We found out that the FBI was told to flag any files that mentioned Donald Trump. And they must have found something, because they've gone from saying that they will release the Epstein client list to saying the list doesn't even exist. Here's the uncomfortable truth from MAGA. Trump's ties to Jeffrey Epstein aren't just limited to flight logs or some pictures taken at Mar-a-Lago. The most explosive allegation against Trump includes Katie Johnson, who filed 3 separate lawsuits claiming Trump raped her at the age of 13 in 1994 during the height of Trump and Epstein's friendship. Katie claimed Trump tied her to a bed and violently raped her, but the reason she filed and then pulled the lawsuits back was because she received death threats. We know Epstein and Maxwell intimidated journalists and other victims. They, along with Donald Trump, could have done the same thing here. Flight logs show Trump flew on Epstein's private jets at least 7 times. While there is no evidence that Trump visited his private island, authorities did find 14 different phone numbers connected to Trump's world in Epstein's black book. This included numbers for his wife, Melania, his daughter, Ivanka, his ex-wife, Ivana, his brother, Robert, personal assistants, handymen, and even members of Trump's security team. Epstein had a ton of ways of contacting Trump. Why? Because Trump and Epstein were close. In fact, Jeffrey once said that him and Donald were best friends.
So how do you know this?
Donald's closest friend.
Then there's Virginia Giuffre, Epstein's most prominent victim, who was recruited by Ghislaine Maxwell while Virginia was working as a spa attendant in Trump's Mar-a-Lago club in 2000. She was not the only girl recruited at Mar-a-Lago. Then there's a 2003 secret birthday letter that the Wall Street Journal uncovered. The letter ended with "Happy birthday, may every day be another wonderful secret." And now it just seems disgusting with what we now know. The letter was written 3 years before Epstein's first arrest, during their very active friendship. Trump said that he never drew anything before, but of course, Trump was caught in another lie because Trump had actually auctioned off some of his drawings for charity, and there's several news articles about it. Then there's Jeffrey Epstein saying, "The first time Trump slept with Melania was on my plane." Epstein called himself Trump's closest friend for over 10 years. He said Trump loved to fuck the wives of his best friends. Then there's the weird 1992 private party with just Trump, Epstein, and 28 young women. George Heraney, a Florida-based businessman, had organized a calendar girl competition at Mar-a-Lago, but he was surprised when they arrived because the only male guests were Trump and Epstein. George said it was supposed to be a party with a ton of very important people, and he warned Trump that Jeffrey Epstein had a reputation about being interested in underage girls. But Trump dismissed his concerns, and the NBC footage shows Trump and Epstein pointing at women, discussing them, and laughing at them. If George Heraney knew about Epstein's desire to be with underage girls, so did Trump. And in fact, Trump did say, "I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side." No doubt about it, Jeffrey enjoys his social life. In 1992, we heard a 46-year-old Donald Trump tell the camera that he was going to date a 10-year-old girl in 10 years. Trump openly bragged about walking into pageant dressing rooms.
What you could also say, as the owner of the pageant, it's your obligation to do that.
So you have done that. Now,
I'll tell you the funniest is that I'll go backstage before a show.
Yes.
And everyone's getting dressed and ready and everything else. And, no men are anywhere. And I'm allowed to go in because I'm the owner of the pageant, and therefore I'm inspecting it. I'm inspecting. I want to make sure that
like
everything is good.
You're there.
Yeah, the dress. Is everyone okay? They're standing there with no clothes. Is everybody okay? And you see these incredible-looking women. And so I sort of get away with things like that.
Trump entered pageant dressing rooms while girls as young as 15 years old were changing. We've even heard Trump's incestuous comments about his daughter, Ivanka. He said,
"If Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her."
Stop it! Oh, it's so weird.
And this continued even as president. White House aides reported Trump talked about Ivanka's breasts, her backside, and what sex with her would be like. Chief of Staff John Kelly had to remind Trump several times that Ivanka was his daughter, and he called Trump a very, very evil man. And then we can't forget about the 25 women who have credibly accused Trump of sexual misconduct dating all the way back to 1970. Then there's the civil trial of E. Jean Carroll, where the judge confirmed that Trump was found liable of rape. The judge literally said that the only reason why it was called sexual abuse in court documents was because Trump used his fingers to penetrate E. Jean Carroll and not his penis. He is an adjudicated rapist, and that means a court of law has formally determined that Donald Trump committed rape. We have failed the 250 victims Epstein has abused. We failed the victims Trump has abused. It's time to release the Epstein files, all of them. And I don't care who's guilty, Republican, Democrat, whoever. I hope you guys got something out of that video, and if you did, check out my last video about how the big beautiful bill is going to hurt Trump's own supporters the worst. Until next time, this is Brown Chubby Bear from Political Bear Nation.